When a 19-year-old walked into the courtroom alone, everyone chuckled, until he revealed he was sharper than all of them combined. The atmosphere in the Maplewood County Courthouse was electric, with whispers rippling through the restless crowd. Their attention flickered between the stern judge perched at the bench and the young man fidgeting nervously by the defense table. The walls of the courthouse, steeped in the weight of countless verdicts, seemed to hold their breath as the tension in the room grew palpable. All eyes were on Ethan Carter, a lanky, unassuming figure in a slightly oversized shirt and scuffed sneakers. He clutched a handful of crumpled papers, his knuckles whitening under the pressure. Behind the bench sat Judge Margaret Hayes, a name synonymous with authority and sharp reprimands. Known for her no-nonsense demeanor, she had little patience for unprepared defendants or theatrics. To her, this case seemed trivial, another young person wasting the court's time. Her disdain was evident as she peered over her glasses at Ethan. "Mr. Carter," she began, her tone clipped, "you do realize the court doesn't take kindly to individuals showing up unprepared, don't you?" Ethan cleared his throat, a faint tremor in his voice. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." A soft chuckle rippled through the gallery, and the judge's subtle smirk didn't go unnoticed. It was the look of someone who had already decided the outcome before the proceedings had even begun. Judge Hayes leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Very well, proceed, Mr. Carter. Let's see what you've got." From the outset, it seemed like a case destined for failure. Ethan, representing himself in a minor traffic dispute, looked as though he had wandered into the wrong room. But what everyone dismissed as naivety was something far more extraordinary, a secret that would soon unravel before their eyes. As Ethan began to speak, the room fell into stunned silence. He recounted the incident with striking precision, referencing timestamps, road conditions, and even the officer's exact position when the ticket was issued. His delivery was deliberate, and though his tone remained humble, an unmistakable confidence began to build beneath his words. Judge Hayes leaned forward slightly, her pen slowing as she jotted notes. Ethan continued, citing a statute from the State Vehicle Code with startling accuracy. "According to Section 408.2b, Your Honor, the method used to determine my speed may not be admissible under the conditions stated by the law." The judge's brow furrowed. She hadn't expected him to pull out a specific statute, let alone use it effectively. The courtroom, too, began to shift. What had initially been mild amusement turned into quiet intrigue. The opposing attorney, a seasoned lawyer with decades of experience, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The statute doesn't apply to this case." Ethan didn't falter. "With all due respect, it does apply, and if I may." He walked to the evidence table, pulling out a detailed diagram he had sketched himself. "This shows why the radar used couldn't have accurately captured my speed from where the officer was stationed." Judge Hayes blinked, caught between skepticism and genuine surprise. Ethan had just challenged the expertise of the opposing counsel, and done so convincingly. But he wasn't done yet. The courtroom, once restless, fell into a silence thick enough to feel. Ethan's voice steadied as he continued, his tone firm. "Your Honor, the foundation of this case rests on the credibility of the evidence presented. If the evidence is flawed, then so is the charge against me." He turned to the opposing counsel, his words respectful but pointed. "May I ask if the prosecution can confirm the calibration of the radar gun used during the stop?" The attorney shifted uncomfortably. "We do not have that documentation readily available, Your Honor, but it's standard procedure." "Standard procedure isn't proof," Ethan replied. "The law requires verification, not assumptions. Without that calibration record, the evidence cannot be considered reliable." The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. People whispered among themselves, no longer laughing at the young man who had walked in looking like he didn't belong. Even Judge Hayes seemed to take a breath before addressing him again. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice softer than before, "you seem to have a deeper understanding of legal processes than most. Where did you learn this?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, then said, "I've been studying law since I was 13, Your Honor. I passed the bar last year." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the opposing attorney raised his eyebrows in disbelief. Judge Hayes leaned forward, her expression hard to read. You're telling me you're a licensed attorney at your age? Yes, Your Honor, Ethan replied. I've always had a passion for law, but... He paused, glancing down at his papers before looking back up, his voice unwavering. I also know how people see me when I walk into a room. They assume I don't belong. The judge straightened in her chair, her demeanor shifting for the first time. The doubt in her expression gave way to something else: respect. Ethan pressed on, presenting more evidence and dismantling the opposing arguments with ease. He referenced case law, articulated legal precedent, and cross-examined the officer's report, pointing out inconsistencies. Each point he made was met with either stunned silence or murmurs of approval. As the courtroom marveled at Ethan's brilliance, one question lingered. How far could he push this case and the assumptions people had made about him? The tension reached its peak as Ethan presented his final argument. He stood straight, his voice unwavering, his demeanor exuding the quiet authority of someone far beyond his years. Your Honor, he said, his tone calm yet commanding, this case is not just about a speeding ticket. It's about fairness, about ensuring that every individual, regardless of their appearance or age, is afforded the same standard of justice. His words landed heavily, silencing the last of the murmurs in the gallery. Judge Hayes leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand as she studied Ethan. Her sharp demeanor had softened considerably, though her eyes remained critical. And what exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Carter? She asked. Ethan took a steadying breath. I'm suggesting that the evidence presented is not only unreliable, but that it violates the principles of due process. Without proper calibration records, the radar's accuracy is in question. Without consistent reporting, the officer's testimony is incomplete. And without clear evidence, this case should not proceed. The opposing attorney stood abruptly, his voice tinged with frustration. Your Honor, this is absurd. He's twisting technicalities too. Judge Hayes raised a hand, silencing him. Sit down, counselor. Her gaze returned to Ethan. Continue. Ethan nodded and held up his papers. I've prepared a motion to dismiss the charges based on these deficiencies. The law isn't about technicalities, it's about facts, evidence, and justice. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Judge Hayes reviewed the motion, flipping through its pages with a furrowed brow. Finally, she placed it down and looked up at Ethan. This is remarkably well prepared, Mr. Carter, far beyond what I've seen from most first-year attorneys. The gallery erupted into whispers, but a quick rap of Judge Hayes's gavel silenced them. She turned to the opposing attorney, who looked visibly flustered. Counselor, do you have a rebuttal? The attorney stood, his hesitation evident. No, Your Honor, the defense has presented a compelling argument. Judge Hayes's gaze returned to Ethan, her usual sternness softened. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice carrying an unexpected warmth, I misjudged you when you first walked into this courtroom. You have not only demonstrated a thorough understanding of the law, but have also reminded us all of its purpose. I hereby grant your motion to dismiss the charges. The sound of her gavel echoed in the room, followed by a moment of stunned silence. Then, a slow ripple of applause began in the gallery, growing louder as spectators rose to their feet. Ethan looked around, his face a mix of relief and disbelief. Judge Hayes stood as well, her expression unreadable. Court is adjourned, she said before stepping down from the bench. But as she passed Ethan, she paused and extended her hand. You have a bright future ahead of you, Mr. Carter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Ethan shook her hand, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. Thank you, Your Honor. That means a lot. But as Ethan left the courtroom that day, he didn't realize this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge and inspire far beyond those walls. The moment Ethan stepped out of the courtroom, the buzz from within followed him like a wave. Reporters who had been loitering in the courthouse lobby immediately turned their attention to the young man. Cameras flashed as microphones were thrust in his direction. Ethan Carter, is it true you passed the bar at 18? One reporter called out. Did you expect to win today? Another shouted. Ethan raised a hand, signaling for quiet. His expression was calm, though a slight smile betrayed his pride. I came here to defend myself just like anyone else would, he said simply. I didn't expect anything except fairness, and that's exactly what I got. His humility only fueled the intrigue. Within hours, the courtroom clip of his closing argument was trending on social media, amassing millions of views. Comments ranged from awe at his legal prowess to outrage over the judge's initial treatment of him. Ethan's story was no longer confined to Maplewood County. It had become a national sensation. Back at home, Ethan's mother, Claire, watched the news coverage with a mix of pride and worry. She had always known her son was special, but she also knew how society often treated young men like him. As reporters dissected every detail of the case, Claire's phone buzzed with calls from family, friends, and even strangers offering congratulations. "Mom," Ethan said softly as he walked through the door, his tired eyes meeting hers. Claire pulled him into a tight embrace, her voice thick with emotion. "You were incredible, Ethan. I just hope they see you for who you are now." But the story didn't end there. The viral attention brought with it both opportunities and challenges. Law firms reached out with internship offers, while advocacy groups highlighted Ethan as a symbol of perseverance and breaking stereotypes. At the same time, skeptics questioned his abilities, framing his success as a lucky anomaly rather than the result of hard work and brilliance. Meanwhile, Judge Margaret Hayes faced her own reckoning. In interviews, she openly admitted to underestimating Ethan, using the experience as a personal wake-up call. "That young man reminded me of why I entered this profession in the first place," she told one journalist. "Justice should never hinge on assumptions." The case that began as a simple traffic dispute had sparked a larger conversation about bias, perseverance, and the power of challenging expectations. But even as the world debated his story, Ethan quietly prepared for what came next. For him, this was just the first step towards something far greater. Ethan's story didn't just fade into the background as another viral moment. It lingered in conversations, classrooms, and courtrooms across the country. People debated not just the brilliance of his legal knowledge, but the deeper issues his case brought to light. How often society judged individuals based on their appearance, age, or circumstances before giving them a chance to prove themselves. For Ethan, the victory in court wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about showing that talent, intelligence, and determination could come from anywhere. "If we focus only on what we think someone can't do," Ethan said in an interview, "we'll never see what they're actually capable of." Judge Hayes' transformation became another significant takeaway. In later cases, she was noticeably more attentive, pausing to truly listen rather than relying on her initial impressions. In one interview, she reflected, "That day in court taught me more than years on the bench ever could. Ethan Carter showed me the power of humility, preparation, and resilience, and he reminded me to look beyond the surface." For viewers and readers of Ethan's story, the moral was simple yet profound. Assumptions are easy, but fairness requires effort. By judging less and listening more, we create space for others to thrive and for their unique gifts to emerge. Ethan became a symbol of perseverance, not just for young aspiring lawyers, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated. Schools invited him to speak, law firms extended invitations, and young people across the nation saw him as proof that brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places. But Ethan didn't let the fame distract him. He remained focused on his future, determined to use his growing platform to inspire others and challenge the barriers placed in their paths. Months after the courtroom drama, Ethan Carter continued to forge his path, unshaken by the attention or scrutiny. In a heartfelt speech at a community event, Ethan summed up his journey. "I didn't walk into that courtroom to prove anyone wrong. I walked in to prove myself right." The truth is, we all have moments when people doubt us, but those moments aren't walls, they're doors waiting to be opened. The audience erupted in applause, but Ethan stayed humble. To him, the journey was far from over. He had plans to continue his education, fight for justice, and help others realize their potential. His story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that talent could rise above bias and that no one's worth should be judged at face value. For viewers hearing Ethan's story, it's a call to action. Take a moment to challenge your assumptions about others. The next time you see someone and think you've already figured out their story, ask yourself, what might you be missing? Ethan's journey wasn't about a courtroom victory. It was about resilience, self-belief, and the power of defying expectations. and in every step forward, he carried the hope that his story would inspire others to take theirs.